This episode has been made possible by our awesome sponsors, Sunsail. Thanks, guys.
Then we're on to a bigger question about the nature,
sustainability
of
yacht building.
The nature of the whole capitalist system, probably.
Hi guys, welcome to the Sailing Podcast with me, Theo Stocker. In my free time, I moonlight as the editor of Yachting Monthly, but today I am on board the Contessa 32 and I'm going to be talking to Jessie Rogers, and we're going to be talking all about teak, the beautiful timber that it is, the dark side of teak, and what the alternatives are. Now, before we go on, Jessie, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and thank you for letting me onto your boat. Surrounded as we are by lots of beautiful timber.
Yeah.
First of all, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do for a living?
Yeah, well, I help to run the family boatyard, the Jessie Rogers boatyard. We build new Contessas and refurb all sorts of boats and fix things up when people have accidents. And we also build carbon fibre davits for super yachts and things like that. And composite projects for all sorts of things, so military contracts and anything and everything made out of composites, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. If you want to hear more about that, our previous podcast, there's a whole load of stuff on there, so do have a listen. Jessie, you weren't always a boat builder?
No, definitely not. And I'm still not a boat builder. I'm admin.
Okay. What's your sort of journey to getting into where you're at today? Because your background's in environmental stuff and journalism, which is kind of relevant to the teak things we're going to talk about today.
I suppose I can't help myself to be drawn to those two things. So I have ended up doing a bit of that, as well as helping the family business, and just being interested in provenance of materials and the backstory of everything. I always want to know why and how and where things come from, and what the consequences are, I suppose, of what we're using. And I suppose that brought us very much to teak, because I suppose partly that got highlighted when Myanmar had the coup, and then it was sort of another layer of awfulness was sort of carrying on. Yeah. But I suppose we built a green Contessa 32 back in 2010, a boat called Calypso. So we had an opportunity to build a new boat, and we thought, why not use it as a kind of showcase to see what materials and what ways you could do things in a slightly more sustainable way. Obviously, inherently, when you're building something, you're making something. Yeah. You're using material and you're using energy, and that's just a fact. You can't get around some of it. But what could we do to make it a bit better? And the Green Blue was sort of fairly in its infancy, so we got involved with them, and they did a sort of partnership with them. So it was an interesting project, but the sort of enduring question, and perhaps the most pressing and most problematic issue, I think, one of them. I mean, there are so many issues out there when it comes to how we live more sustainably. But teak is, and particularly, I suppose, all tropical hardwoods really that come from places where deforestation has a really massive impact. Yeah. Because of their carbon sequestration impact is better in the tropics. Yeah. That's just Myanmar teak is just the most incredible wood, and that's why boat builders love it. Yeah. So
we're going to come on to that in a little bit, and I want to find out all about what it is that makes teak so amazing. Before we get there, can you just tell us a little bit about the boat that we're sitting on right now? Obviously, and maybe a little bit about the wood that's gone into it. Yes. So we're on Ascent.
We're on Ascent. Now, well, Ascent, some of this is original teak from 1970, whenever she was built. Then when we've refurbished her, we've used Kebony on the floor, which was a treated timber. Yeah. And yeah, so she's not a kind of wonderful example of different types of wood you can use.
Yeah.
Well, certainly not that you can get anymore, because Kebony, unfortunately, they don't make anymore,
Yeah.
which is a great shame. But yeah, so she's
But she's a 1972.
1972. And you know, obviously, the great thing about it is it's incredibly. Well, you see those ships that have gone down with teak in it that we've used had some salvaged stuff, and it was sunk in just after the war, and you can dig it up off the bottom of the seabed and use it. It's an incredible. There's no getting around the fact that it is the most extraordinary material, which is why it's so hard to wean ourselves off.
So let's talk about a little bit about teak then. Describe. So people who aren't necessarily boat builders, don't deal with timber all day. You look at wood, you go, well, there's softwoods and hardwoods. What are the characteristics of teak that make it so good for using in boats?
So obviously, I'm not a shipwright, but I talk to the guys, and I understand, and I do understand what they're.
So you've got guys in the yard literally 100 yards away,
Yeah.
and they're constantly either refitting boats, building new boats,
Yeah.
and they're using traditional joinery and shipbuilding techniques to put together boats like what we're
exactly,
sitting
and they
in now.
take barrels of resin in our case, and bits of wood, like literally sort of blocks of wood, and they turn. It's incredibly skillful.
Yeah.
So I totally respect the fact that people have a difficult job to do, and the material you use is obviously a big part of that. So you want to make it.
So I'll come back onto the teak. Just you mentioned that they're using resin. Obviously, we're on a fiberglass boat.
Yes, exactly.
So it's 1972. Ascent Contessa 32.
Yeah.
And she sailed in the 1979 Fastnet. Came top of class 5. Previous episode of the podcast, we talked all about that. If you want to listen to that.
Yeah.
So she's a proven sea boat. She's very stable. Contessas are well-known boats. They're built of fiberglass. For the last 40, 50 years, pretty much all new yachts have been built of fiberglass. Why do we need wood at all? What's the role of wood in boat building today?
Well, interior joinery. You need cupboards, and you can do sort of mouldings and stuff, but obviously there's still a role for wood in interior joinery, and that obviously doesn't have to be teak, because that doesn't need to weather like teak, and teak is wonderful because it is a really brilliant exterior wood, so you can have it outside. You don't need to treat it. You can literally just leave it, and it'll still be good. It doesn't get slippery. It doesn't. So it's great for exterior. Interior, it really isn't necessary. So in my opinion, it shouldn't be used. I know I'm sitting in a boat that's covered in teak, but that was made in 1972. So you shouldn't have to use it for regular interior joinery, so you can use other alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of modern boats now, I guess, are using even composite panels that are then covered in thin wooden veneers, or even bamboo veneers and that sort of stuff.
Exactly. So there's, things have moved on, especially in the exteriors. You've got really the big areas where teak is still used in yacht building is decking, and in our case for things like tow rails, capping rails. So a lot of boats obviously have aluminium, and has superseded that. Where you have to kind of go round corners or bend the wood, teak is just wonderful because it has a flexibility. It's so hard, and yet it is that's the nub of it, I think.
Yeah, so it's hard,
incredibly hard, so very tight grained.
Yeah.
But it's also
and the proper slow grown forest grown teak has grown slowly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that is becoming harder to,
and therefore the grain is really close, so you get
tight.
less soft material. I don't know what that's called. I'm sure there's a term for the what actually makes up the wood in between the hard bits of grain. You get the soft bits of grain. If it's grown slowly, the rings are tightly together, so you don't get that. That's the point, isn't it? About hardwood. Yeah, compared to, for example, a softwood where you get little bits of hard grain and then large bits of soft.
Well, exactly, because it's just grows quickly.
So fast,
So
And then it's an oily timber as well.
so it's quite oily, so it has this flexibility, which and also it means it's not slippery on decks, and it is just extraordinary. It's a wonderful natural material, but there's too much demand for it, and in countries where the regulation isn't, you can't be sure that what you're getting has not been contributing to deforestation.
Yeah.
Basically.
So that was the next thing I wanted to come on to was what's the matter with using teak? It's a wonderful wood to use exterior on boat. It's ideally suited to boat building, to yachts.
Yeah.
It looks lovely. It weathers to a lovely silver grey colour, or you can have it a nice sort of orange colour. You can varnish it. You can bend it to capping rails. It's tough. All of that stuff.
Yeah.
What's the matter with it?
Well, it's just there's too many people want to use it, and so it's not. It's contributing to deforestation, particularly. Well, I mean, obviously, in Myanmar is the place where which has historically the place where Burmese teak is the kind of creme de la creme is where it comes from.
And that's because the climate there and the forests that they have, it's an indigenous species there.
Yeah.
And it's grown slowly, and those forests have built up over
exactly. But I mean, it doesn't take any working out that if you then increase the demand exponentially, and then you carry on taking the same amount out, you're not going to be able to replant. And some of these places obviously were virgin forests. They were primary forest that's been removed.
Sort of ancient, we'd call it ancient woodland in the UK, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, there had already historically been a big problem. So the coup happened in 2020, I think, and even before that. So they had, with the civilian government, they had managed to stop the deforestation, or nearly. So logging had really dropped off. They'd stopped it. So then there was a kind of rush to use to get as much out before 2016. So there was a big sort of stockpile, and this is the stockpile.
So was there a sanction that came in 2016?
No, it wasn't a sanction. It was the Myanmar government, because it was a civilian government, and they recognised that it wasn't sustainable. They needed to stop deforesting at the rate that they were, and there was a real problem with losing the timber. So, and there was also a lot of teak. They were basically just selling it too quickly. They were adding more to the market, which was reducing the price. Yeah. And they could see that it was not a sustainable thing to be doing. So in the long term, it was better to control the market, and therefore control the price, and sell it like that. Anyway, and then obviously that all went by the way when the military coup happened in 2020, and so there have been sanctions. I suppose the point is there have been strong sanctions from a kind of humanitarian and corruption point of view since the Myanmar coup. Yeah. But even before that, it was still.
There were already environmental concerns.
There were massive environmental concerns before that. So it had already got to the stage before the coup that people were using the stockpile, which is what, so you'd go to a timber merchant and you say, oh, I'd like to buy some teak, but can you reassure me? This is kind of my journey into it. Yeah. I want to know that what I'm buying is okay, that I'm not contributing to massive deforestation and being part of the problem. And you would always get these assurances, oh, yes, it's fine, because we do, we know the people, and it's all very clear, and we've got this stamp, and then when you dig into it a little bit further, it turns out that actually it's only the first importer of the wood that is required to do the due diligence. So if the first person that imports the teak into, say, the EU or the UK, the UK was the EU then, manages to get away with it, basically. Yeah. Then the next person, or in the case of Italy, which were only relying on fines, so they might take the fine. Yeah. And then sell it on to their next person in the supply chain. And they are then just free to tell you anything they like, because they don't have to do the due diligence. So they haven't broken any laws, because they say, It's okay. It's not me, because they've done their due diligence, even if they haven't.
And presumably, if somebody said, "Well, I've imported £1 million worth of teak. I've paid my £100,000 fine for having imported it."
Yeah. They didn't. In the case of, it's in some countries, the interpretation. So the interpretation of the European EU TR, the European Union Timber Regulation, was that in some countries would say, "Oh, we'll confiscate the teak if you're importing, you haven't done your due diligence," and in other countries, they would say, "Or give you a fine." So then you would just.
So then you can keep the teak
you
and
can
do
keep
whatever
the teak
you want
and do
with
whatever
it.
you want with it.
So it would make a little bit of a dent into their profit margins, but
Exactly.
not enough to discourage them.
No, exactly. I mean, there was even a case recently in Germany when one of the timber merchants got had and for not doing the due diligence, they got I think it was something huge, like 300 million fine, and then was it 3 million, and he got £200,000 fine, something like that. Anyway, it was a big fine, and he then appealed it and has recently taken it back to. Then it got sent to the European court, the appeals court, and they decided, this was relatively recently, they decided that because the teak came via Taiwan and was then processed, that it wasn't, he wasn't doing anything wrong, so he's been let off.
So it was still Myanmar teak.
And this was from 2008, so this is way before the coup, but the point is, even then, it was still a real problem. You couldn't be sure that there was no risk, that there would be.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is that was, and even now, there's still people find ways.
There's loads of ways around it, aren't there? So I think one of the problems that we've talked about in the past is that the logs get felled in Myanmar, and if you import them straight from Myanmar, you know exactly where they've come from. But there's also a fairly porous land border with China, and you're not that far from. I'll get my geography right. Is it Bangladesh? Thailand.
You've got.
You're not far from India.
No, exactly. What's really interesting, I just found out the other day that so every month,
Yeah.
the Myanmar Timber Enterprises, they have an online auction of teak, and just recently they've changed to. It used to be Myanmar money, which I can't remember what it's called, and US dollars, and they've recently said they allow Chinese yuan,
Yeah.
Thai baht, and European,
And the euro.
and the euro.
Okay.
So
So people
what-
are paying in euros for
What-
Myanmar teak from Europe, where you are not allowed to buy.
Well,
Myanmar teak.
where they're buying it from, I don't know, and who knows what you can assume from that, but
Yeah.
it's not a.
No, I mean, as the editor of a sailing magazine, it's not unusual for me to receive emails from normally Chinese companies saying, "Dear sir, I have some lovely top quality teak. Would you like to buy it for your business?"
Yeah.
Obviously, as a magazine producer, I can't do anything with teak, but I would be highly suspicious of that timber anyway, because it goes from Myanmar. You're not allowed to buy Myanmar timber. It goes across a porous land border. They stamp it. They say, "Oh no, this is Chinese, Indian, Thai teak," and then from there, somebody. So the paper trail of how you do it is incredibly hard to prove and pin down, isn't it?
Yeah. And
Which is one of the reasons that the EU's just said, no, you can't do it because you can't prove that it's clean. Actually, because there's so much corruption in its funding and military junta and all of that, we've actually, in the magazine, you and I, the articles we've worked on, we called it Blood Teak, didn't we? Because it's like blood diamonds, that it's really got, that teak has blood on its hands in terms of how it's processed, both for environmentally and actually as a human cost as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's a real double whammy now. But unfortunately, the routes into the EU have not. I think if you look on the Eurostat, the statistical, it hasn't dried up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
where it's dropped off into the EU, it's increased into India.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to. The problem is, like I say, you can get as many assurances as you want from people that their wood is different.
Yeah.
It's just, which is where the EU got to. You can't be sure.
Hi guys, Theo here. Sorry to interrupt the podcast for a second. I just wanted to share a short message from our awesome sponsors, Sunsail, who have helped to make this episode possible. Now, if you've been on a sailing charter holiday, the chances are you've heard of Sunsail. They've been around for over 50 years and they operate in more than 20 destinations around the world. I've been lucky enough to have been on a couple of charters with Sunsail, including a magical week exploring the Dalmatian coast in Croatia with my family. And the one from Grenada in the Caribbean was out of this world. The Greek Ionian is also one of my favourite places to sail, and Sunsail have just launched a new flotilla itinerary there called Hidden Harbours, where they take you to some of the very best spots for you to have your adventures on the water. The lead crew are on hand to support you 24 hours a day and take care of all the other arrangements so you don't have to worry about a thing. If you want to take life really easy, you can also add in a skipper on your boat as well. Sunsail operate an impressive fleet of boats at all their bases, including award-winning monohulls and catamarans between 32 feet and 54 feet, so there's a boat to suit you and your group. If you're thinking of booking a charter in 2026, Sunsail are offering the opportunity to have a free day of sailing for every week that you book. If you book 7 days on the water, you'll pay for 6 and get the 7th one free, or if you book a fortnight of sailing, then you get a free weekend of sailing thrown in. This offer is valid everywhere around the world apart from Italy. To find out more, head to www.sunsail.com/UK and make your booking before the 30th of January 2026 to get your free day afloat. So don't just sail, Sunsail. Right, let's get back to the podcast.
Is there anywhere in the world that you can buy timber, teak, from, that you can say from ground to end user, I can trace the entire journey?
Yeah, so I think plantation teak, which if you don't know your timber, you could get sold, and I've spoken to people on the inside who've said, oh yeah, I've been to, somewhere, X yard or whatever, and they've told me that this is plantation teak, and I can tell you that is old growth teak. It's the grain's not right. If you know what you're looking at, you can tell whether something's plantation. Plantation has obviously grown on a more of like a 40-year cycle. So we've been buying teak from Sykes Timber, which is a UK timber merchant who we have again, it all comes down to relationships, and it's people you trust to tell you the truth, that they have done their due diligence, and because the paperwork is. And
that's from that plantation teak is grown on.
Well, that's grown in Indonesia. That's grown in Java.
Okay.
That's an interesting one. So Java, so all of Indonesia is part of a thing called flag tea, which is a voluntary partnership agreement, which is actually quite interesting because only Indonesia has managed to get through the regulation you need in order to join or to be signed up for flag tea. I think Ghana is about to get its certification.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's quite interesting because it's like a bipartisan thing. So, sorry, not bipartisan. Because it's interesting because it's a bilateral agreement. So you, rather than saying these are the rules that you need to comply, sort of a colonial approach. If you don't do it like this, they come up together using lots of cross-party collaboration and lots of different stakeholders, and they say, okay, what's a good way of making sure these are the ends we want to get to? How do we get there together to make sure this is a sustainable thing for the future, which works for everybody, which still ticks all the boxes, and so Indonesia as a whole managed to get through that, which means that all the wood coming from Indonesia would be green laned into the UK. So you don't have to do so. If you buy flag tea wood, you don't then have to do your due diligence, because you can be sure that
there is a system
in place
which trace it from root,
which has already done it. So it makes it really appealing to buy wood from Indonesia. But then you are relying on the person that you've bought it from, who tells you it's from Indonesia.
Yeah. So it's a very difficult process to pin down every step of the way.
It does come down to humidity, because I've had people telling me that they've got Indonesian plantation teak, but I don't know them, and I'm not sure that it's not actually Myanmar teak that they've
rebadged,
that it's been rebadged. So it's quite a tricky one.
It's a bit of a minefield.
And then you've got the other issue, which is now it's sort of lots of acronyms, and it is quite complicated. Like all of these issues, it's not a black and white. It's always complicated. But the EU TR timber regulation is now being taken over by the EU DR, the deforestation regulation, which so you get rid of timber out, you get rid of one specifically for timber, and they're bringing in this new regulation which includes beef, so cattle, cocoa, coffee, or palm oil, soy, and timber.
Everything that people are chopping down tropical
exactly. So that you've got to sort of, not only have you got to do all the same due diligence on all of those issues, but you also have to make sure you're not contributing to deforestation. So, and they're categorising in different risks. And so this is causing quite a lot of. It's a tricky one, because I'm not sure if you have to basically there's been so much pushback that's been delayed, and that means that that's another. It was supposed to come in this year, and now it's going to be next year. No, it was supposed to be last year, and now it's going to be maybe this year. And so there's a feeling amongst a lot of the NGOs, and that there's time is being wasted, and that the timber is being sort of, because it's being swept up with that, there are people pushing through and not.
Yeah.
So it's a really thorny issue, and I think also it doesn't help that just the way the world's going, that
it's more chaotic rather than less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And less compliance with rules and willingness to. It's more of a kind of grab what you can sort of mentality generally, isn't there?
Yes,
I think.
The old sort of Western policed rules-based system that has worked quite well in our favour is being challenged.
Yeah. Exactly, and so.
Before that all gets too depressing, as we look at the collapse of the world order as we know it, and the role of teak in that, what other, if you don't want to use teak, what other timbers can you use? You've had quite a long journey at Jessie Rogers and building Contessas and things, looking at other timber options. What are the things that you've tried, and what's worked well? Yeah, well,
there was a long list of things that we've tried, not necessarily a long list of things that have worked well. I mean, like I say,
give us a little sort of run through.
So interiors, no problem. There's so many lovely other woods that you can feel good about using, that are beautiful, that are
So what are
cherry, walnut.
And what are they? Describe each of those
maple.
A little bit.
So cherry is that has a lovely. I like it. It's still quite traditional. It's a little lighter, sort of orangey. Mind you, teak's quite orangey as well. So it's it has a beautiful grain. Then you've got the walnut, which is dark, and also very striking. I think very.
Does that have a wavy grain, or is that?
Not really. No. I mean, like all wood. No, it doesn't have a wavy grain.
Yeah.
So it's not. There's all sorts. It's not.
And then some people use oak and things, but oak's a bit more open grain, doesn't it?
It's
oak, and a bit brittle.
It's quite heavy. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
quite sort of. Well, I don't say heavy. It sort of feels. It's not such a fine furniture sort of wood, is it? It's more of a
bit more agricultural.
Yeah, a bit more. And outside it gets slippery, so it's not good for that.
Okay. But you can have basically whatever.
You can have whatever. You know, there's lots.
Because you can varnish it and it stays dry, and
there are
it's
exactly.
just the aesthetics of it.
Exactly, and again, sometimes it's like. Again, it's people, sort of traditional people that look at something and they'll say, if you're an old style, they'll say, oh, well, it's a bit like pine, isn't it? Pine furniture, which was always painted because it was a poor quality wood.
Yeah.
And then it was really popular and everybody stripped all the paint off because they liked it. But if you're a joiner, you would look at it and go, oh, I don't like that because this is not a tight grain.
I guess mahogany is still sort of...
Mahogany, doesn't exist. I mean, you can't get mahogany. A mahogany alternative now.
Yeah, okay.
But none of them are... They're quite dark as well. I think quite old-fashioned.
Yeah.
But I'm sure all these things come around. But I think also there's a new sort of generation that you've got this super rich people who are buying these big boats that are fitting them out, and maybe at the sort of top end of those BAPs they don't really care. Or
I mean, so there's a couple of well-known super yachts that have been officially found to have Myanmar teak.
Yes, well, famously Jeff Bezos is at Ocean Co, who were very pro, doing all the right thing, got had up by, for but again, inadvertently, because they will be told.
And Sailing Yacht A, the three-masted futuristic thing, that was covered in teak as well.
But they will be told that it's fine, and they haven't done anything wrong. But you don't have to do very much homework to know, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same with the other thing that people are using. Sorry, carrying on being depressing, but the other thing that is being hailed as the sort of the new answer, which is one of the big teak decking companies in the States. So they're using this what they call green teak, which is veneer via Thailand. So they get teak and then they stick it together and make a sort of composite. But again, that's a fantastic way of washing. It would be. I'm not saying
it's a bit like Alpi wood, which is sort of it's made of real wood, sort of, but then it's cut into veneers, stuck together, and then sliced the other way, and then you can colour it and change the grain so it looks like whatever you want it to look like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that they do that, but it would be a fantastic way of washing Myanmar timber because it's too cheap as well. It's not. Anyway, that's
and then on deck, heading out on deck, you say, there are some bits. I need some wood on the deck. My old teak deck's worn out. What am I going to replace it with? What options have I got?
So we have been through a real journey of trying to... So the best thing we used by far was Kebony, which is a thermally modified maple, which is a Norwegian company. And they still make thermally modified wood, but they don't use the maple. So they use a radiata pine, which is much cheaper and much, but it's not good for what we want it for because the grain is too wide and it doesn't.
And so they take effectively thermally modified timber as you take a softwood.
Yeah.
You heat it up, cook it.
Yeah. So it's not just as simple. Yeah, it's not just as simple as cooking. So. So there have been a few different types. So Lignia was one that was spirit yachts.
Yeah.
They used Lignia, and that was really promising. And then they went bust, but they still did. They've infused it with something which was a bit nasty, so it wasn't going to the end of life.
It had a
formaldehyde. It wasn't going to have a good end of life story. I don't think it was. Anyway, that they went down the pan.
But the idea is that you're taking a wood that is a softwood, you're treating it and making it behave like a hardwood. Yes,
exactly. And so Kebony was using, it was a sort of byproduct of the sugar industry. So it was a kind of caramelizing.
Yeah.
And then you've got Akoya, which is a kind of vinegarizing.
Yeah.
So you have lots of different ways of modifying wood thermally.
Right, so there are a few timbers out there. What are you using in the yard at the moment when you need timber on board?
Well, we are using, interior-wise, we use quite a bit of cherry.
Yeah.
It depends on the customer, obviously, because ultimately it is the customer's we have to be driven by the customer beyond saying, I want Myanmar teak, and we won't go there. If they want teak, if we do want to use teak, we are using the Java plantation teak.
Yeah. Which isn't cheap, but it's
really expensive. Yeah, it's really expensive.
Yeah, and if you want timber but you don't want teak on deck, have you got a solution?
Well, so the most recent one we used, which was a sort of a Kebony alternative. So it was a thermally treated maple.
Yeah.
But we've had real problems with splitting.
So you're
and
still
cracking.
on the hunt for.
Yeah, we're still on the hunt. Yeah.
And have you gone down the route of synthetic teak?
Yes, we have, and that works actually really quite well on the deck. I think it's incredibly effective. Like on the deck, it looks amazing, and sometimes you really can hardly tell.
Yeah.
And they've really improved the quality of things like the heat. Treading on it with your feet.
Yeah.
Cork is another one, which is great. I think that's a really good.
Silver's quite nice. Goes in nice silvery colour.
Again, there's cork and cork, so you have to be careful.
Yeah.
There
it depends what resin it's mixed together.
Exactly. So you have to be careful. Just make sure you're buying a good quality one, and don't go for the cheapest. Probably. I don't. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I know that all cork is not equal.
Yeah. And then there's some that I've seen. One's made from the waste from rice farming.
Oh.
So the husks of rice mixed together. Is that
well? Yeah. When you actually look into that one,
Yeah.
I think it's what's it mixed up with.
Okay. Yeah. And then another one that is effectively a synthetic plastic deck, but it's made from the waste materials of the timber industry, where they boil down all the offcuts of the wood and get a sort of an oil from it, which, as far as I understand it, is basically how they used to make Stockholm tar, which is what you then put on decks to waterproof them.
Okay. What's that called?
That's third generation flexi teak.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But they're using the oil feedstock that they're using in that is a timber oil feedstock. So where you cut a pine tree down, you cut it off to make it square.
Yeah, and you got all that waste.
You got all that waste, and they take that, they pulp it and boil it or squash it or whatever you need to do to make effectively Stockholm tar, which is what's always traditionally been used on ships for waterproofing.
That does sound interesting.
And they use that as a feedstock to make a synthetic teak. What it's like at end of life, I don't know if you could call it a bio product.
No, well, it depends what they mix it with. That could be an interesting one.
Yeah, so then that would work on decks, but it's not going to do any structural stuff like capping rails or washboards.
And that's the problem. I think that is the issue. It's like when it comes to the kind of the edges of the margins of your cockpits or the tow rails. It's a tricky one, and I don't know. I don't know long term for everybody. I mean, plantation teak is so, like I've always said, you use it, you treat it like gold.
Yeah,
that's how it should be used. It should be used as a really, really precious resource that you should feel that you should just understand what it is. And I think that's.
And is there anything else other than that you would like to see happen in the future? Is there a sort of an end point you could see that would be what solution are you trying to find?
I think that has to be driven. I mean, partly it has to be driven by legislation, but that seems to be so slow. And so I think you have to see a real sea change in what people. And maybe that's coming, but it has to be the consumer. Like I've said before, it's sort of when fur coats went out of fashion, when everybody wanted to wear them, and then suddenly it was a bit embarrassing to be.
Because you killed some bears.
It didn't feel good anymore, and that we haven't reached that point, and I don't really understand why we haven't reached that point.
So we need fashions to change.
Yeah, and people to just be. But then we're onto a bigger question about like the nature,
sustainability,
the nature of the whole capitalist system, probably, and how
we'll leave the new world order for another episode, I guess.
That's another. Yeah. I don't know. You should just because you can afford it. We need to be asking.
Doesn't mean that you should do it.
Yeah, you just. And the other thing is, I think what would really help would be if you had due diligence should be a requirement of if everybody had to do their due diligence, not necessarily the end consumer, because that would be a nightmare going to buy anything, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you had due diligence all the way along the chain, you wouldn't get people deliberately greenwashing you. Not just passing the buck, they're actually
fleecing you.
They're actually kind of lying, and they might believe what they're saying, they might not believe what they're saying, but it doesn't matter because there's no. So if that was, and then you need enforcement, because and that's the same with everything, isn't it? You can have.
If you're going to introduce the rules, you need someone to.
You need somebody to enforce them.
Yeah.
And that's. I think that's a problem in every sphere.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Good. Well, let's see what happens.
Yes.
One final question to wrap up.
Yeah.
What was the first boat you ever sailed?
Oh, well, I wasn't born into sailing, but I had a kind of real urge to get sailing when I was sort of probably young teenager, and I don't know where it came from, but I just really, really wanted to. I really felt like I wanted to go to sea, and anyway, we found a sort of titular uncle who agreed. He was very old school. He agreed to take me out in a little dinghy, and and I just remember he gave me the helm. It was a little scow or something, and I'd never sailed before. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just remember him shouting at me, saying, "Can't you see where the wind's coming from?" Because I was obviously heading into the wind, and I couldn't understand. The sails were flapping away because I was like, "No, I can't." I didn't know what he was talking about. And so I think for me that's been quite good, because not growing up sailing, I really, as having children and teaching them whatever, I really understand when
the process of
learning, and not just inherently understanding what it means, whether you're head to wind or whether you're, you don't. I don't take it for granted, even now, even though I've done loads of sailing and I've lived on boats, and I still feel like that. Well, there's always. I'm very well aware of everything I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that experience didn't put you off, and that you're here facilitating the building of such beautiful boats, and really sort of pushing hard to find sustainable solutions for the timber that we use on these boats, as well as lots of other sustainable things, which I'm sure we can talk about in another episode.
Okay, thanks, Theo.
Good. Thanks, Jessie.
All right.
Well, thanks guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed joining us for that deep dive into teak and timber in boat building. I'm sure there's lots of stuff that we could have talked about that we haven't had time for today, but if you've enjoyed that, give us a thumbs up, give us a share, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and let us know in the comments if there's anything that you think we should be talking about or people we should be talking to, and in the meantime we will see you next time, and join us for the next episode of the Sailing Podcast. Cheers guys.
Thanks to our awesome sponsors, Sunsail, for making this episode possible.